I'm wondering how helpful a guide, the history is, Industrial Revolution, Agrarian Revolution, any of them, given your earlier point to us, which is that this is in a different category. This isn't just another development, another human tool. It has its own agency. Therefore, given everything you've been saying, are we here without a guide? Are we into uncharted water? The precedents of the past are no help to us.
There are some help because they are warning us about the kind of dangers that we might be facing. And I'll just tell a story. I just came from San Francisco a few days ago. So I meet one of the kind of important people who are leading this revolution, and they tell us that, ChatGPT was already released a year and a half ago, and look, everything is okay. So all these prophecies about this will destroy the world, this is nonsense. And they just think on a completely different time scale than historians. It's basically like having a meeting in London in 1832 about the Industrial Revolution, and somebody saying, the first commercial railroad was opened between Manchester and Liverpool already in 1830, 2 years ago. And look, nothing has changed. Everything is okay. So this is safe. And we need the historical perspective because it helps us make sense of the pace of history. But of course, as you said, this is something completely new, because unlike trains or cars or atom bombs, it can make its own decisions and invent its own ideas. Again, I'll give just one example, which is by now quite famous, that when OpenAI wanted to test the capabilities of GPT-4, this was again 2 years ago, they gave it as a test to try and solve CAPTCHA puzzles. CAPTCHA puzzles are these visual puzzles that when you try to access some website and the website wants to make sure that you're human and not a robot, so you have to identify some twisted words or numbers or something. And GPT-4 couldn't do it. It couldn't solve the CAPTCHA by itself. But the researchers helped it to connect to an online site, TaskRabbit, where you can hire people to do things for you. And GPT-4 asked a TaskRabbit worker to solve the CAPTCHA for it. Now, this is where it becomes really interesting. The human became suspicious and wrote, are you a robot? Why do you need help in solving CAPTCHA? Are you a robot? So it asked the $1 trillion question. And GPT-4 answered, no, I am not a robot. I have a vision impairment, which is why I can't solve the CAPTCHA by myself and I need your help. And the human believed it and solved the CAPTCHA. Now, the amazing thing about it, nobody instructed GPT-4 to lie. And more importantly, nobody told GPT-4 what kind of lie would be most effective. And if you think about the excuse it gave, it was a very effective excuse. And this is creativity, this is agency.
And it had showed an understanding of human psychology, because it knew that the person would feel sympathetic towards the robot. I think we have successfully terrified our audience. We're out of time for this bit. I think leaving hanging is you said $1 trillion question, but it's up there, which is what is to be done, to quote Lenin, who you cited earlier. What might be the answer to some of these questions? We'll make that perhaps the first question when we come back after this break, but the rest of the second half is going to be taken up with all of your questions. Behind me is a QR code. Use AI to get hold of TaskRabbit, and they will hold up your phone there, and that will get you to a link, and there you can put in your questions. We're going to meet back here after the interval. I think it's about 15 minutes or so, and Yuval and I will Yuval, not me, will address your questions. But for now, thank you very much. Thank you all very much indeed, and thanks especially to all of you who submitted questions, whether it was you or your pet robot who did it. They were good, some really, really good questions, and we'll get to all of those. We left you with a bit of a cliffhanger, which is the what is to be done question. There were variations of that actually in the questions submitted. So you've set out the dangers, the risks. What would you see the human response be?
Well, first of all, it should be emphasized that AI also has enormous positive potential. Otherwise, nobody would develop it. It could provide us with the best healthcare in history, with the best education in history, with solutions to climate change and ecological collapse. So we definitely want to continue developing it. I mean, there is no question of just stopping all development of AI. The question is how to do it responsibly in a way that benefits everybody. And here, again, the answers we get from history is that we need to think much more about safety, and we need to think much more about the potential unintended consequences, and we need to give human societies time to adapt. Humans are extremely adaptable, but we just need time. And if we start with thinking about some of the regulations, then some of them are obvious, like make companies responsible, liable for the actions of their algorithms, and not liable for the actions of their users, but are liable for the actions of the algorithms. Because this is a huge, whenever you raise the issue of liability and responsibility, the company says, but what about freedom of speech? What about human agency? We don't want to censor the users and so forth. So it should be very clear. For instance, if a human being publishes on Twitter or TikTok or Facebook or anything like that, a hate-filled conspiracy theory, this is not on the company. This is the fault of that human being, and I would be very careful before I would kind of instruct these private companies to start censoring human beings. However, if the company's algorithm then deliberately promotes and recommends this particular conspiracy theory, this is already on the company, not on the human user. This is what it should be liable to. And the same model should apply in many other situations. So that's one key regulation.
And just on that, you make the point in the book that actually when it becomes a company's self-interest to clear up a problem, they can do it pretty quickly.
Yeah,
and you've
like
got a precedent in mind.
You know, like 20 years ago, email was on the verge of becoming unusable because of the immense amount of spam, of junk email that was flooding people's mailboxes. And when it was in the interest of the companies like Google to find a solution, they found an amazing solution. That today there is hardly any spam. I mean, most of the spam is filtered immediately into the trash. There are very few false positives and very few false negatives. I mean, very few cases when an email that you really are waiting for was accidentally sent to the trash. People use the excuse sometimes, but it rarely actually...
I can't imagine what you mean, Yuval.
It rarely actually happens. So if they want to, they can do it. Another key regulation we need is to ban counterfeit humans, to ban fake humans, that AIs are welcome to join human conversations on condition that they identify as AIs.
And in that situation, do you think people would welcome the AI into the conversation? Would human beings want to talk to an AI?
In many cases, yeah, again, you think about healthcare. So if there are many situations where you would welcome a conversation with an AI doctor, especially if you can't get hold of any human doctor. And
you've adapted to the life in the UK very, very quickly, I must say. You've clearly picked up the tenor.
And again, in this case, I think it could be an immense improvement. The only thing is, the AI doctor should identify as an AI, so you know who you're talking with.
I get that for a practical encounter, like when you need something diagnosed or done. I meant a conversation, a chat, social. Would you want to socially converse with an AI robot who had said, full disclosure, I'm AI? Would somebody want to just shoot the breeze with that?
People do it all the time right now. And again, if you want to, you're welcome to, but you should know that you're talking with an AI, because otherwise, and this goes back to the issue of the survival of democracies. I mean, democracies in essence are conversations. This is what democracy is. Dictatorship is one person dictating everything. There is no conversation. Democracy is lots of people talking with each other, listening to each other to try and reach together some important decisions. And what happens if you have this circle of humans talking together and suddenly a group of robots enter the circle and start talking very loudly, very persuasively, sometimes very emotionally, and you can't tell the difference? The human conversation breaks down. In that situation, we have to know that no, these are the robots and these are the humans. And this is what is happening right now in places like Twitter. Like you see some story which gets a lot of traffic, a lot of traction. And you think, oh, a lot of people are interested in that story. It must be important. I also want to know what everybody's talking about. So you also click on it. What if all the traffic was actually bots? You need to know which stories really interest human beings and which stories are being promoted by bots and algorithms. So these are just a few examples of regulations that we need yesterday. But it should be emphasized that because of the rapid pace of the AI revolution and the fact that these are agents and we can't anticipate all the things that could go wrong, what we really need is institutions staffed by some of the best talent, human talent, and also with enough resources to buy the latest technology so that they can understand and react to things as they develop. This is not something we can just regulate in advance.
So let's go to audience questions. A lot of people have submitted them without giving their name. This is one of them. It says, when you have these talks with world leaders, business leaders, political leaders, and you do have those conversations, big tech leaders especially, the question asked, do they understand the urgency and the danger?
Many of them do. Many of them understand better than almost anybody else what kind of thing they are developing, and this is why some of them are themselves making warn people. And you even have this strange situation when some of the industry leaders are issuing these apocalyptic warnings, and then critics say, oh, they just do it to inflate their egos and to actually increase the hype around their technology, which, I don't know, could be, but you don't see it in other industries. Like you don't see big oil going and saying, oh, this could destroy the world, and being very happy that, oh, now we are very important. So I think it's very important generally to be kind of charitable and generous in how we interpret what people say.
Have you had a conversation with Elon Musk?
No. I had some interactions with him, but not a real conversation.
But even people who have met him say that, I think.
I was in the same room.
You were in the same room?
In the room where it happens. And nothing happens in the room where it happens. I mean, they're having the same discussions like everywhere else. And the thing is that many of them are aware of the dangers. Many of them, they are good people, they have good intentions. They also have done a lot of good in the world. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the dangers, the threats, what went wrong, because this is the job of historians and philosophers and social critics. But it should be acknowledged. We need to see the complexity of reality. They have done also a lot of good. And when you ask them, why don't just slow down a little? Why don't just let humanity understand what is happening, have a human conversation, decide on the proper regulations or whatever? Almost all of them say the same thing. We would like to, but if we slow down, the competition will not slow down and they will win. The other company, the other country. And then when you talk to the people in the other company or the other country, they say the same thing. And it is this arms race mentality. And the real tragedy is that basically what they are saying is we can't trust the humans, so we have to run faster to win the race. And then when you ask, but do you think you'll be able to trust the AIs? And they say yes. And this is kind of, in a nutshell, the essence of the tragedy, that we are unable to trust the other humans, but at least some of us think we'll have a better chance trusting the AIs, like you are having a difficult relationship and you say, okay, I'll dump this relationship, and the other relationship, this one will succeed.
Yeah. Well, that goes to a couple of questions that came in that pick up on that. Arshia says, do you think human beings will eventually be extinct due to the AI revolution? And if yes, are you fine with that, as it's just another part of evolution? And then sort of related from Grace, what will happen to the human brain when AI thinks, creates, decides, builds, sorts, collects, analyzes faster than our brains? I think they're both going at the same thing, which is what happens when AI outruns us?
Well, it's an extreme scenario, but it's not impossible. I mean, it's part of these kind of extinction level dangers. If it happens, it will be a terrible tragedy, not just to us, probably to much of the ecological system. Again, all the other animals on the planet, they are also like us, organic beings. And being controlled by an inorganic entity that have a completely different views, interests. The worst case, the really worst case scenario that we are talking about, again, it's not very likely, but we have to think about it also, is not just that this will lead to the extinction of humanity, but that this will lead to the extinction of organic life and of the light of consciousness, of beings that are capable of feeling things like pain and pleasure and love and hate. AI could be the beginning of, again, a new evolutionary process which is inorganic, which might not involve any consciousness, any feelings. It could spread from planet Earth to other planets. You know, for organic beings that evolved on Earth, it's extremely difficult. For humans or for elephants or for jellyfish or for any other organic entity to exist on other planets, different gravity, different atmosphere. For AIs, it's easy. So we could really imagine an AI civilization spreading from Earth throughout the galaxy, but it will be could potentially be a kind of dark empire that they know how to construct fleets of spaceships, but there are no feelings, there is no consciousness, there is no awareness of anything. So this is kind of the really extreme worst case scenario. I wouldn't place a very high probability on it, but it's somewhere in the kind of landscape of probabilities.
And the questioner asked whether you would be okay with that, in the sense of...
I think you can understand from the way I describe it that I'm not okay with that.
But I did get that sense. But that's an emotional reaction. I'm just thinking in terms of the logic of evolution and how different we are from the amoeba.
Yeah, if you think about beyond that to the logic of the laws of physics, so, as far as we know, the universe wouldn't care. The laws of physics wouldn't care. But we care because, again, this is the distinctive thing about consciousness is that it cares.
And you're confident there that AI couldn't develop consciousness?
No, that is another possibility in the kind of landscape of possibilities, that AIs do develop consciousness. And maybe a word about the meaning of consciousness and how it relates to intelligence. So intelligence is the ability to pursue goals and to solve problems on the way to attaining the goals. The goals could be to increase user engagement. The goal could be to win a chess. The goal could be to find all the ways that proteins could fold. And there are problems on the way, and intelligence finds way to overcome the problems and attain the goal. Consciousness is the capacity to feel things like pain and pleasure and love and hate. And in humans and other mammals, consciousness and intelligence go together. Our goals are really set by our feelings, and the way we solve problems is also by relying on our feelings. So we tend to confuse the two. But in computers, at least until today, we saw a very rapid, really amazing development of intelligence and no development of consciousness. At the present moment, there are more and more people who start claiming that actually AIs do develop consciousness, and we have no objective test to know whether this is true or not. But just again, talking about the different possibilities, there is a scenario that we don't know how consciousness arises in organic beings, in humans or dogs or chimpanzees. Maybe consciousness has something essential to do with organic biochemistry and carbon atoms, so it cannot exist on a silicon basis. And then AIs will never have consciousness. Maybe not. Maybe it is possible to create consciousness, for consciousness to emerge on very different types of systems, and AIs will develop consciousness, maybe of a very different kind than us. Again, these are open questions. We are just at the very, very first stages of the AI revolution, and these are going to be some of the most important questions we face in coming years.
Several people asked whether you use AI yourself.
We all use AI, whether we like it or not. You know, when almost all the systems that we use online rely on AIs to find our way, to book plane tickets, whatever. Increasingly, people who do research use AI in research, in translation, in so forth. So it's really now not really a question whether we like it or not. You know, you apply to a bank to get a loan, maybe you don't use AI, but the bank is using AI on you to decide whether to give you a loan.
There's quite a few people who are asking for your advice, I think. You know, casting you in the role of guru. I liked this one particularly. What AI business would you start today? The questioner didn't attach asking for a friend, but I have a feeling that they're looking for some investment advice. What AI business would you start today?
Well, the business genius in our family is my husband, so it's a question that better that he answers. It's not in terms of business, of what we really need. What we need is help in building trust between humans. As I said earlier, we are in this kind of paradox that the people who are leading the revolution think they can't trust the other humans, but that they will be able to trust the AI. And I think they are solving the wrong problem first. In history, it's often a question of, what are your priorities? Which problem do you solve first? I think we first need to solve the human trust problem before we solve the AI problem. And again, we can try to use AI to help solve the trust between humans, but this is the crucial problem to focus on.